area is distinct from the wider agricultural landscape, and as such, its development with a single house would have no adverse impact on the landscape, the environment, or ecology of the area, or indeed highway safety. This has been assessed and demonstrated by a chartered landscape architect. We would also like to highlight, as confirmed in the officer's report, the council are currently unable to demonstrate...
You're now up to 4 minutes.
Thank you. Currently unable to demonstrate the 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, which is another reason why the application should be supported positively. Whilst this could be looked upon as a modest development, small sites such as this are very important incremental approach to helping with the council's housing land supply shortage and also contribute to the local community. As the owner of a local building company, if planning permission is granted, we would implement the project without delay, subject to planning conditions, creating further opportunities for more other viable developments, providing work locally and adding a much needed boost to the local supply chain. This application has been quite an emotional, expensive and sometimes very stressful rollercoaster lasting almost 13 months. And we do now certainly welcome the recommendation for approval from the planning officer.
Just coming up to 5 minutes.
This concludes my representation. On behalf of myself and the team behind the application, I'd like to thank you for your time and consideration of your comments.
Thank you very much. Right, we've got questions from Councillors Vickers first, okay, and then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, sir. You referred, I think, when you were talking about the drainage issues, you referred to lack of maintenance. And I wasn't clear, maintenance of what and by whom? Well,
I know the land very well, obviously. Can you still hear me? Yeah, know the land very well. So there's 2 gullies at the bottom where it showed the flooding on the pictures. There's 2 gullies which fill with leaves and they need to be cleaned out regularly, simple as that. It's at the bottom of the access road, which I own at Tudor Avenue, to the highways where it meets the rumble strip. There's gullies, it gathers there. And obviously fills up. And I think what's happening is it's filling up, being in construction, and then going into the Thames Water pumping station. So the surface water's going into the pumping station, then it's not coping. So I think if you resolve the issue of the surface water or standing water, the Thames Water issue would go away, because I think that's causing the problem. And that's where I mentioned that I'd be willing, and as I did mention to the people after the site visit, that, you know, let's work together. I don't want to build a house for my family with that problem. So
you weren't referring to the maintenance by Thames Water of their pumping station?
No, I wasn't. Okay. I was regarding to Tudor Avenue. It's lots of trees, leaves, debris. It just needs to be cleaned out regularly, I think. It might not have enough capacity as a soakaway. I'm not sure where it is, but again, I'd be willing to look into that to solve the problem.
Okay, Councillor Vickers. Okay. Right, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Callow, for the presentation. You mentioned about the piece of land or the space used by the residents for the bin collection and all those ones. And I think if I'm right, you mentioned about you would be willing to work to...
Yeah, I would.
Can you please clarify? Sorry to interrupt. Can you please clarify, is it a piece of land owned by you, or is it not adopted, but it's not owned by anyone? So can you give us a clarity?
Well, at the moment, it's a free for all, the bin collection down there, and it's basically put in the entrance of the site. There's no designated area to put the bins at the moment, but I'd be willing to, on my own land, to create a bin store, hard standing, with a drain in it, you know, so there was not a water issue, and it maybe enclose it so everyone's got a place to put their bins on collection day for the bin lorry to park up to. Again, if it's a family home that's sitting there, I'm not going to want a problem with bins across the road or drive or whatever. So yeah, I'd be willing to help out with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
The questions, right, Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you, and welcome to the meeting. Could I ask you when you took ownership, because you made a comment about the intent of the previous owner was to develop here. So when did you take
about 3 years ago? The original owner is very ill, so a friend of the family, and he sort of given up on it a bit. So it was offered to us, and we took on the challenge. Yeah.
So if it's 3 years ago, which of the refused applications are yours, and which
the last one?
Just the last.
Yes, on the 2023.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks, Hooker.
Thank you. Going back to my previous question with regards to a lot of the objection is about this flooding.
Yes.
This is an unadopted road. Can you just expand whose responsibility it is to clear the drains from there to ensure the flooding doesn't happen? The maintenance, I know, of an unadopted road and everything else of an unadopted road is those of the residents.
Yeah, I don't know if you've got the drawing with the red and blue lines on it, if that could be pulled up at all. Yeah. Yes, you can see the blue lines. That is what we own, and where the blue line crosses Tudor Avenue, that I would say my ownership is from there up. Well, it is, and from there below is highways. So, and the gullies are literally at that point where there's a rumble strip. So you could say it's highways or even Thames Water. If they've got infrastructure right next to it, then, you know, they look after the trees around that area. They should probably look after the drains as well. But again, I'd be willing to come to some sort of agreement with the neighbours to see if we can put some sort of maintenance plan in place.
Okay, continue on. Further question?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to ask a second question about the land itself, which is clearly marked as under your ownership.
Yeah.
Is it agricultural land or is it a paddock?
I'm not 100% sure. I don't think it's a paddock. It may have been agriculture a long time ago, but I know that there was a hotel and an industry on there, industrial units on there before the previous landowners purchased it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just trying to get this planning permission required to become a paddock. So
right.
I'm trying to understand what's the real situation here.
Right.
Okay, anyway, we'll ask officers. Yeah, thank you.
Further questions? No? Okay, you can return back to public gallery. Okay, I'm now going to call upon one of the ward members, Councillor Heather Codlin. I think you're going to speak as a ward member. Again, you know the procedure, 5 minutes, and we'll notify you after 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure I won't take up that much of your time. I think as ward member, I actually support this application. I understand the neighbours' concerns about the flooding, but I think that could be addressed partly as part of this, our SUDS requirements for the property and the work that needs doing around the drainage in the road. But I'm portfolio holder for Children's Services, and our schools do not have enough children in them. And I actually think our villages, all our villages, need new dwellings, not large housing estates wherever. They need these small groups of houses. And actually, I think this will help our vibrant villages. I like the design of the house as well. The land is not in agricultural use. It's got trees on both sides. It's not used for anything. Yes, I understand the wildlife idea, you know, the nutrient neutrality and all that, but that's being mitigated. I think this is an ideal opportunity for a single dwelling to actually help bring more life into that village. So I'm here to support it. That's all I needed to say.
Okay, thank you. Members, questions? No? Looks as if you got off lately. Okay, thank you. Right, now it's a chance of members to ask officers. So Councillor Abbs first. Is that highways or is it a planning issue?
I'm pretty sure it's going to be Mr. Shepherd, and he probably knows the question I'm going to ask. What is it? Is it a paddock or is it field?
A paddock is generally considered as agricultural land. It can be used for grazing livestock. So we've treated it as agricultural land, but paddock is quite a colloquial term in terms of it could be a paddock for a sheep, could be a paddock for a horse. It's not a question. The default is it goes back to an agricultural use.
So my understanding is incorrect. You don't need planning permission to use a field as a paddock then?
Not if the purpose is that for grazing livestock, which is related to agriculture. If you were to change the use for equestrian and it was a paddock for that, then there may be a requirement.
Okay, but you have looked at this in terms of sheep and pigs and things of that nature as agriculture,
as an agricultural,
not as an actual horse paddock. Okay, thank you.
Right, Councillor Vickerson and Councillor Hooker.
Yeah, on the drainage issue, it's a question for well, in the absence of Paul Becker, it's in.
I'll do my best.
We've heard it. It would seem to be true. Nobody's contesting the fact that the pumping station, Thames Water Pumping Station, can't cope now. Whether or not the additional home will make any difference to that, it would clearly be helpful if we could somehow enforce some improvement, upgrading in that existing pumping station. Do we have any powers to do that? It's perhaps not strictly relevant, but it might, reduce the opposition if we have a solution to the existing drainage problem to offer.
So in short, no. It'd be a case that we're content with this proposed development, doesn't add to the issue. The development itself washes its own face, doesn't add to any of the issues. Thames Water have confirmed, and I can share the screen in terms of the drainage strategy. They've confirmed there's sufficient capacity in the area. So if I pull this one up for you, for councillors to review. So we're looking at this is the document submitted by the applicants, and that's their drainage strategy. I'm just going to see if I can make this larger for you. So we have confirmation pre-application when it finally loads that there is sufficient capacity in the area for foul water in terms of to serve the development. So in terms of foul water, we are content. And then we move to the drainage strategy, which you may want to pull up into your packs. We have a proposed soakaway to the north here, to the northwest. So you can see the blue is your surface water. So anything that runs off from the gutters, etc., on that side of the site will be directed into the soakaway to the north. And that has been checked in terms of trial pits, which are located at an acceptable distance away from that soakaway. I can show you the calculations in terms of the soakaway. They do testing to see how quickly the water moves away. And that's been accepted by our SUDS officers. So in terms of foul water, Thames Water have confirmed they've got capacity. That may be disputed by other parties, but we have to go with what they've written to the applicant and what's been submitted to us. In terms of surface water, we're content that it's moving away from the area of surface water for flooding in that vicinity. Also, the SUDS officer has confirmed that they've provided alternatives. So if either of these weren't to work at application stage, weren't feasible, there are alternative methods and strategies they could employ in terms of package treatment plants and things like that. So our SUDS officer was quite positive about the application in terms of the SUDS and the foul water on there. So in short, we can't stipulate improvements to Thames Water's network. We only have to make sure the application can wash its own face, so to say, and it can. And Thames Water confirm there's capacity in their network.
Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. Two questions. Can you confirm that a part of this application there is a change of use from agricultural to residential?
I can, yes.
Okay. Part of the application, I'm just wondering why I was asking the question.
Yeah, it's agriculture at the moment. The default for land uses is agriculture. It's clearly moving to domestic in the application. That's the purpose of the dwelling.
Yeah, thank you. And the second one was, as a part of the presentation from the objectors today, they did suggest maybe that a flood risk assessment should be considered. Could you just, for the benefit of the committee, give them an idea as whether that is an advantage or not an advantage at this stage?
So in regard to a flood risk assessment, the application isn't in flood zone 2 or 3. And there's no surface water on the site itself across the dwelling. So that's why the local authority hasn't asked for a flood risk assessment. There is obviously some benefit to that to the applicants. They're aware of the surface water if they weren't before of that. It's clear that they know that situation. And the application has addressed the issue in terms of surface water and making sure the question is that we're not adding to that issue. So an FRA may show you the depth of flooding, surface water flooding to that access. We'll make you aware of that and we'll check the safety of that. But it's clear from our SUDS officer, he's happy you can access and egress in a car. There's no emergency issues in terms of flooding in a storm event. You can still exit the property. It's not deep enough to warrant issues on that side of things. So we're quite content without a flood risk assessment. It could have formulated part of the drainage strategy, but it's not essential.
Thank you. I think that might save some time in the debate and looking at conditions at the end that we need to consider that. Thank you.
Okay, right, Councillor Foot.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much, Chair. Question for Matt. Obviously, Mr. Kalo mentioned about the adopted roads and unadopted roads. From West Berkshire's point of view, can you show the committee on the maps where the West Berkshire highway, adopted highway is, so that we're clear on that, please? Thanks.
Oh. Sorry. Gremlins in there tonight.
Chair, it might be helpful if I just asked Matt where the adopted highway from West Berkshire.
So yeah, I am. So in terms of what was indicated by the applicant, that's what's being shown to me in terms of the screen. So it changes around about that boundary. I'm hesitant to provide 100% confirmation on their land ownership. Is a tricky business. We have to go with what we've got in terms of the red lines and the blue lines. So what was shown earlier, is our understanding is correct. So where the applicant indicated is what my screen is showing me in terms of where we got to in terms of boundaries. I don't know, Gareth, is that a fair answer?
Yes, thank you. My understanding is that the highway boundary is really around the outside of the turning head area, that everything further up the road is private, and that the adopted highway extends to probably where that was mentioned of a cobbled area or set area, which is at the edge of the turning head, which is a traditional marker for the indication of where it is between private and adopted.
Is that okay?
Thank you, Chairman. Again, question to Mr. Shepherd. Matthew, like you mentioned, if not for this paragraph 11 of the NPPF and the tilted balance aspect, this application would have been rejected. Just trying to ask, in terms of this application qualifies, in your view and officer's view, qualifies that paragraph 84 of the NPPF, I think 80 or 84, I can't remember, but we're looking at exceptional design. So would this application qualify in your view and officer's view that exceptional design criteria? And my other slightly related question is that how sustainable this one, because none of the speakers mention about sustainability, how sustainable this application, this house would be in terms of water, like heat, or all the other things. Thank you.
Yeah. So in terms of paragraph 84, it's not a house of exceptional design. It hasn't been presented to us. Officers are content. Its design is acceptable, meets CS14, and it's not going to harm the character of the area through its design. So we've seen the drawings. We think it's acceptable. In terms of sustainability principles, there's nothing put forward in terms of this application. It's going to have to meet building regulations and the most up to date of those building regulations. So we'd expect it to meet that's the bare minimum on there. There's no requirements and policies in our core strategy that a single dwelling needs to have exceed building regulations. So it would have everything that we would expect it to see on that side of things.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Gaines.
Just a very quick question about the permitted development, item 6.52. I noticed, and I know we can't consider that tonight, I noticed there's a piece of land behind the current allocation land that's obviously got nothing on it, and it's supposed to be meadowland. Does 6.52 indicate that no further development can happen on that piece of land?
So what's been indicated is an area for biodiversity enhancement. It's not something that's required for this development because it was submitted prior to compulsory biodiversity net gain. It's what's been put forward in the application. It doesn't preclude someone applying for planning permission in the future for something on that site. That's not what's being considered with that speculation on there. We have to go with what's been proposed here. We're looking at the plot on that section. So it is something to be aware of, but also we'd advise councillors that it's not something you can consider tonight. It may be in the future. It may or may not happen. It's purely speculation.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Councillor Vickers?
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, a matter which Councillor Ahmed Sharash has raised about the tilted balance and the MPPF has reminded me about correspondence that I had, because it applies not just to this application but to any application in the AONB. And I'd just been reading the draft management plan that's coming out, which referred to it. I wondered if Ms. Inston could perhaps give to the rest of the committee what has only up till now been sent to me and to Councillor Gaines because of the wider implications. Because I questioned this, the MPPF latest version, the November 2024 version, did have a change which I thought might be relevant to this.
Deborah.
Chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor Vickers. The query was with regards to the new duty that local authorities have now, rather than to have regard to the national landscape, it's to conserve and enhance the national landscape. So there's a change in focus. We have taken on board that as part of this application, but as set out in the report, we've noted on the fact, obviously, it's in a protected landscape. But the harm that we've identified from the proposal is limited and localised to a very small area, so wouldn't have any harm on the wider NDL. So in that sense, we are comfortable that we would conserve the national landscape, so we would be carrying out our duty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It saves me bringing it up in the debate when it's really information I got from you as an officer.
Further questions? If there isn't any, no, I'm sorry. Well, unfortunately, we've got a set procedure and we will follow through the set procedure. And I'm now going to call upon one of the members to open the debate to discuss the application. So who's the willing member? Okay, Councillor Amos-Raj and then Councillor Abs.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to be brief on this one. I think I'm not going into a lot of details. Taking out the flooding issues, normally I was a bit surprised to read this one in detail. Like normally this type of application outside the settlement boundary would have been refused because we've looked at, but because of this paragraph 11 aspects and then the tilted balance, we need to consider this. But I looked at this application in the context of, as Councillor Codling said, like he's providing a home, family home, and it's not a harm in itself for the A and B that much. And it's going to be a development which can provide that sustainability. That's what my question was, but I don't think there is any advanced sustainability aspects or the improvements which can be made. But I think the applicant has made comments like willing to work with the residents and all those aspects. So I think like it should be supported, and then we should accept the officer's recommendation. But that's for me for now.
Okay, I'm not going to push you for a proposal at this stage because I think there's other members that wish to speak. Right, Councillor Abs.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. The only reason this is being put forward that I can see for approval is because of a land supply issue, which is a fabrication of a small period in time, which is coming to a close quite soon, in which case the 5-year land supply will be resolved again. So I've always thought we're meant to be policy led, planning policy led. And on our planning policies, and even on the NPPF, which just talk about conserve and enhance. So Deborah mentioned the word conserve, but she didn't mention the word enhance. It certainly doesn't enhance what's there. So at the moment, I'm inclined the opposite of, unfortunately, answer. Yeah, we can always make the exception of, yes, we'll put one there, we'll just let that one there, we'll let one there. Well, why have the policies in the first place? But you either are going to follow the policies or not. Now, of course, we can look at the planning history here, which is relevant. And last time it went forward, the last two we were told to note, one of which was under the applicant's heading, I suppose, or he put it in the previous one, and it's gone 3-2-1, refuse. I really don't want to go again. I know the officers I think they have to recommend approval in this case, but they wouldn't be, and they clearly said they wouldn't be if it wasn't for this tilted balance. So if I happen to interpret the tilted balance the opposite way, then I would feel comfortable refusing the application, because we either have policies or we don't have policies. So I'll certainly want to listen to the rest of the debate, because I'm not clear on it myself, but I don't think it's as black as white as saying, yeah, this will add one home, because it's not going to solve the 5-year land supply with one home. It's just not going to do it. Not as it currently stands anyway.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vickers, I think you are next on the list.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Yes, I agree with a lot of what Councillor Abbs has just said, and I'm reminded of an application in Hungerford recently where the tilted balance could have applied in the same way as the recommendation here, but didn't. That was actually down to the quality of design, as I understand it, mainly. But there is always a subjective element to this. However, I also agree with what the ward member said, which is that, and indeed the applicant himself referred to, is that we do need this sort of organic growth of small sites in our rural area. And if the design is acceptable to our officers, and we've heard there is not a single internal statutory consultee who's got any problems with this, which is, again, is different to the one that I'm thinking of in Hungerford, I find it very hard to disagree with the recommendation we're getting. I did think that because it was AONB and because of the latest change in the strengthening of the degree to which we protect and, I suppose, to enhance the development, I did make a site visit, and I do agree that the harm to the AONB by this is minimal. This is a scruffy bit of land at the moment that is not really enhancing the landscape at all, and we do need the housing, and we don't, the tilted balance applies. So I'd be comfortable voting for this application, but it is finely balanced.
Further comments? Right, Vice Chairman.
Thank you. I think we have a responsibility as this committee that we make decisions on our policies. We're in this very small window of time. By June, this situation will possibly change. We could get and have had an avalanche of applications which may not have been considered to being put in. But because of this shortage of land supply, this is seen as a marvellous opportunity to put in applications that are against our policies. And all respect to Councillor Vickers, scrubby bit of land or not, you could say that about the whole of the North Wessex Ridgeway. But we do have a responsibility to make these decisions on policy and just consider, are we happy the fact that this is being tilted as an approval on the fact that we're in a situation of a 5-year land supply? I'm not happy with that situation.
Councillor Abbs again.
Yeah, thank you very much. I said I wanted to listen to some more, and this had a couple of times a scruffy piece of land. Well, I hear that whenever we go this. What do we expect the land to look like unless it's cultivated or unless it's wilded properly? When I look myself, it looks like a piece of land would look if you're not doing anything with it. That doesn't make it scruffy. That makes it a wildlife habitat. So, I struggle with the word scruffy there, only a little bit. It doesn't sit well. However, C1, it's a core policy. It's not an adjunct policy. It's a core policy. So to go against it is, I need a really strong reason, and I'm not hearing a really strong reason to go against the core strategy at the moment.
Councillor Gaines.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very difficult decision. It's a very finely balanced between the two things. You just mentioned our policies, and we do have policies, and we do have this lack of 5-year supply. However, the NPPF overrides any policies we have locally. It's a national policy, and the national policy says, because we haven't got a 5-year supply, we should approve this plan application. Thank you, Chair.
Well, we've had interesting points for and against, but we haven't got to the final conclusion. So, right, Councillor Abbs, is that going to be a proposal?
I'm going to make one comment, then a proposal, yes. The NPPF certainly overrides everything. Totally agree with you, Councillor, on that point. But it talks about a weighted balance. It doesn't say you must approve it. It actually brings in a whole bunch of reasons as to why you can still refuse stuff. So I accept what you said, but I don't agree with it. But there again, why would we? I'm quite happy to cede the floor again. Yes.
Okay, but do you wish to come back on that then?
Yes, Chair. 7.3 actually says in presumption of favour of sustainable development means, and it gives you some lists of reasons why you can, the only reasons you can't accept it, and none of those reasons are valid.
In your opinion, Councillor?
In my opinion, Councillor.
Okay, I think we're now going to get back to systematic. So I think I'm really looking for a proposal. So Councillor Ahmed Farage.
Chairman, I can propose that. Propose to support officer's recommendation to approve. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Does that find a seconder? Okay.
Happy to second that.
Okay. So before I put it to vote, is there any specific conditions that you'd wish to have included?
No, Chairman, I think we've asked this question, and I think we mentioned that Section 106 agreement will cover a lot of aspects. And if we delegate that one to the officers to cover the aspects of the things which were being discussed, the bin area, there are a lot of other things, the nitty-gritties of that one, then I think we should be okay. Yeah.
I agree. I'm happy with the conditions listed in the report and the mention of the Section 106. I don't think we can compel the bin store area, but if that's something they want to do unilaterally, but I take officer advice on that.
Okay.
Yeah, conditions indeed. If it were to be approved, there is what's marked as a carport, which is a home office, very easily converted into an annex, a flat of some, anything we do to tighten up a condition to make sure that was not being done. We talked about removing permitted development elsewhere, but we can only work within the red line anyway. That's the only bit that I saw that was within the red line. Okay. Is there anything we can do there just to help?
Chair,
Deborah.
yes, we can add a condition to ensure that it remains ancillary to the main property and doesn't become a separate residential unit.
So if the proposer and seconder would
do you accept
that?
Yeah,
that would be great.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. But I think it was mentioned by the applicant and it's in the plan, but I'm happy to put that as a condition if that's could be.
Condition assures it.
Yeah, okay.
Councillor Willison, is that a condition?
It is, Chairman. I'm pretty sure this is not achievable, but is there any way at all we can put in some sort of condition to prevent development of the remainder of the blue land? No, that's what I thought.
No, I'm afraid not. There wouldn't be that ability.
Can we do as an informative?
Informatives really are meant to be advice to applicants to help them with the development rather than warnings about what not to do around the the site. So no, I would probably advise against that. If any application were to come in the future, we'd obviously assess it against our policies and on its own merits.
Okay, right. We've had a proposal, seconder, and conditions included. So can I have a show of hands to support this application, please? Okay, got the numbers against. Okay, that's 6-2. I normally say it because we're requested now to put the numbers for the audience on Zoom, but obviously they won't be aware. Okay, so the application has been passed, and thanks very much for your attendance.
We are on stream now.
Oh, you are live. Oh, we are live streaming now. Okay. Oh, that's good news. Sorry, I wasn't aware of that. Members, do you want to continue or do you want to recess? 60 seconds. Okay, members, if we can return to our seats, please. Okay, all right, Vice Chairman. Okay, we are now going to reconvene the Western Area Planning Committee, and we're now going to move on to item 4 in brackets 2. In its application 24/02784/PIP, the Burnham Cottage, and it's in Boxford. I'm now going to invite Lauren Hill to begin her presentation. So, Lauren, when you're ready to commence, away you go.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is 24/02784 PIP. This application seeks permission in principle. Sorry, there we go. Permission in principle to permit one detached dwelling at Burnham Cottages, Westbrook. The application comes before committee due to having received over 10 letters of objection. The application is recommended for approval subject to the completion of a habitats regulation assessment, which demonstrates a neutral impact on current nutrient levels in the River Lambourne catchment, and a Section 106 agreement to secure the necessary off-site phosphate mitigation measures. The site comprises 0.14 hectares and is located to the north of the Ribbon development of Westbrook, and is adjacent to and just outside of the settlement boundary as shown by the black line on the slide. For the purposes of policy ADPP1, the site is therefore deemed to be within the countryside. The site is also within the Westbrook Conservation Area, with the northern boundary shown by the orange line, and is within the North Wessex Downs National Landscape. The site comprises previously undeveloped agricultural grazing land surrounded by hedgerows and several trees. There are detached and semi-detached dwellings of varying sizes on all sides. This is an aerial photograph showing the location of the site. It shows Knapp's farmhouse to the north, Copper's farmhouse to the west, Malthouse Cottage to the east, and number 1A Burnham Cottage adjacent to the south. It also shows that the site is surrounded by hedgerows and several trees. This is a view of the site looking from the highway towards the northeast. This is the view from the highway looking southwest, with the site being behind the hedge and the existing entrance being on the right, adjacent to the dwelling house. This is the view taken from the highway looking south towards Westbrook, with the site being to the left behind the hedge. This is a view taken of the site from the existing access looking towards the east. And this is the view taken from the site from the existing access towards the north. The permission in principle consent route is an alternative way of obtaining planning permission for housing-led development, which separates the consideration of matters of principle for proposed development from the technical detail of the development. The permission in principle consent route has 2 stages. The first stage, or permission in principle stage, establishes whether a site is suitable in principle, and the second technical details consent stage is when the detailed development proposals are assessed. The second stage is very similar to the full application. In accordance with the planning practice guidance, the scope of this permission in principle application is focused on whether the in principle matters of location, land use, and amount of development is acceptable. It therefore needs to be determined whether proposed land use, being C3 dwelling house, and the amount of development, being 1 dwelling house, is appropriate in this location. All other details, such as proposed dwellings design access arrangement, parking, drainage, and associated biodiversity net gain cannot be considered at this stage. This is an indicative plan demonstrating the intended development on the site. It shows a detached dwelling with a detached garage at the center front of the site. Members are reminded, however, that this is an indicative plan and the final layout and design of the dwelling would be submitted and assessed at technical details consent stage. However, for the purposes of this application, the plan does demonstrate that one detached dwelling in this location can be achieved. Representations have been received from 22 objectors. These objections are summarized in the report, but some of the main issues relate to ecological concerns, including proximity to the SSSI and nutrient neutrality, traffic and parking concerns, drainage, the visual amenity in Westbrook, and the sites being within the North Wessex Downs National Landscape, the potential for overshadowing, overbearing impact, and obstruction of views resulting from the proposed dwelling, the fact that the site is characterized as agricultural land, the site's being located in a conservation area, the site's contribution to the rural character of the area, and the site is located outside the settlement boundary, which needs to be respected and should not be expanded in this location. In terms of consultation responses, environmental health, drainage, and highways have been consulted and offered no objection to this application in principle. Archaeology has stated that there may be some archaeological potential due to the known finds in the vicinity. However, an appropriate condition would only be possible to impose at technical details stage. Ecology has stated that they have no objection in principle. However, they need to undertake an HRA and therefore have consulted Natural England with a period of 21 days to comment. The Conservation Officer has assessed the application and states that the site would not harm the significance of the conservation area, subject to an appropriate design submitted under technical detail stage should this permission in principle application be approved. Oh, sorry. Just finding the right slide again. There we go. As part of the local plan review process, the site was promoted for inclusion within the settlement boundary by the landowner. The site was therefore considered as part of the settlement boundary review, which was undertaken as part of the evidence base for the local plan review. As part of this process, the council wanted to explore the potential for including the site as a single plot or other similar small-scale development opportunity, which would infill or rounding off opportunity that is physically, functionally, and visually related to the existing built-up area. The parish council was consulted on this basis and objected to the proposed settlement boundary amendment. In response to this objection, the council reviewed the proposal and concluded that whilst the extension of the boundary to the east of the highway would present a good rounding off opportunity, on balance and in consideration of the objections received from the local community, the settlement boundary was not revised to include this site. In terms of consideration of the permission in principle, as already mentioned, only the proposed location, land use, and amount of development is within the scope of this application. The proposal is located outside the settlement boundary and therefore for the purposes of policy ADPP1, the site is located within the countryside. Policy C1 of the housing site allocations DPD gives a presumption against new residential development outside the settlement boundary with limited exceptions. Such exceptions are not relevant here as there is a clear settlement boundary adjacent to the site. In terms of policy ADPP5, and the proposal's impact on the North Wessex Downs National Landscape, the site is of a sufficient size to accommodate a single dwelling whilst retaining an open and spacious setting. Furthermore, the proposal would be read in relation to the existing ribbon development that runs through Westbrook. It is therefore considered that the proposal would have only a limited impact on the national landscape. Policy C3 of the Housing Site Allocations DPD states that the design of new housing must have regard to the impact individually and collectively on the landscape character of the area and its sensitivity to change. This policy mostly speaks to the design of the dwelling rather than the considerations within the scope of this application, being location, land use, and amount of development. In summary, while the proposal would only have a limited impact on the national landscape, it would be unacceptable in terms of policy ADPP1 and does not meet the criteria of policy C1. In terms of the site's location within the conservation area, the area contributes to historic qualities of the national landscape. The conservation officer has assessed the proposal and offers no objection and states that development of this site in principle would not harm the significance of the conservation area, subject to an acceptable design proposal submitted at technical details consent stage. The proposal therefore complies with policy CS19 and the NPPF. In terms of the site's impact on nutrient neutrality, the site is within the River Lambourne Special Area of Conservation, which is in an unfavorable condition due to excess phosphates. In accordance with the habitats regulations, nutrient neutrality requires that housing developments should not add more nutrient pollution to the water catchment. Nutrient assessment and budget has been submitted, which indicates that the applicant has significant wider land holdings where there is scope for mitigation by taking agricultural land out of production to enable this development. The council's ecological officer has reviewed the proposal and confirmed that they were satisfied in principle with this proposed mitigation. The proposal is therefore recommended for approval subject to a planning agreement to secure the off-site mitigation. The PPG indicates that planning obligations cannot be secured at permission in principle stage. However, a recent appeal cost decision highlighted the fact that a permission in principle application cannot be granted for development, which is a habitats development, unless the LPA is satisfied after taking into account mitigation measures. In another appeal, the inspector allowed for a permission in principle application to be subject to a Section 106 agreement to ensure appropriate nutrient mitigation measures were put in place. It is now understood that before any consent can be granted for a habitats regulations assessment must be conducted by the local planning authority and Natural England be given 21 days to comment. To prevent unnecessary delays, it is therefore recommended that members delegate authority to the development manager to grant permission in principle, subject to the completion of a HRA that confirms no adverse impact on current nutrient levels in the catchment, as well as the completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure the required off-site phosphate mitigation measures. To conclude, this application is proposing a new dwelling in the countryside outside of the settlement boundary. The site has not previously developed land as defined by the NPPF and does not constitute a form of development which is permitted by policy C1. The council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing supply following the publication of the NPPF in December 2024, which has significantly increased the minimum local housing need figure. As a result, the West Berkshire core strategy is regarded as out of date, and the presumption in favour of sustainable development as outlined in paragraph 11 of the NPPF, or the tilted balance, is engaged unless the provisions in footnote 7 apply. With relevance to this application, national landscapes are listed in footnote 7 of the NPPF, and therefore any harmful impact could disengage the tilted balance. It has been deemed that the impact on the national landscape would be limited. While the proposal would introduce built form to a previously undeveloped site, the harm from this built form would be isolated and the proposal would be read in the context of the existing linear development in Westbrook. Therefore, mitigation can be secured by way of appropriate design, scale, materials, and landscaping at technical detail stage. In the context of paragraph 11 of the NPPF and the tilted balance, the limited harm identified is not considered to provide a strong reason for refusing the proposal. The addition of one dwelling would contribute to the overall housing supply, which is in shortage in West Berkshire. While the addition of a single dwelling house would not have a significant impact on the housing supply, collectively, small developments such as that proposed would have a positive impact. There would also be social and economic benefits associated with the provision of housing. However, given the small scale of the development, these benefits carry moderate weight in the planning balance. It is considered by officers that, taken together, the planning benefits of the proposal insofar as the location, use, and amount of development is concerned outweighs any disbenefits. This conclusion is reached in the context of the NPPF's presumption in favor of sustainable development. It is not considered that the NPPF policies provide a strong reason for refusing the development, and that any adverse impacts of the development would significantly and demonstratively outweigh the benefits. Overall, and in light of the tilted balance, it is considered that the development plan and the material considerations are such that permission in principle should be granted. As such, the application is recommended to members for approval, subject to the completion of an HRA that confirms no adverse impact on the current nutrient levels in the catchment, and the completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure the required off-site phosphate mitigation measures. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Lauren. I now call upon Councillor Mark Hayes Newington, who I believe is the parish representative for Boxford. Is that correct? Right, okay. Again, you've got 5 minutes and we will notify you after 4 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, councillors, officers. The Parish Council has consistently objected to this particular development, largely because its site, at the end of the day, is agricultural land in the area, in the national landscape, and in a conservation area. Any development on this site is a breach of every single core policy that the council lays down, and it requires we as parish councillors to consider when we look at developments. And indeed, on top of that, it flies in the face of other applications that have been made in a similar way and have been refused fairly recently as 4 or 5 years ago for similar type development. So there is a clear view in the village that development here would be completely inconsistent with the policies that are being applied otherwise. The village actually at this point thins out as it goes into the rest of the landscape of the national landscape. That field on its own, that site, is the first break in what is a significant, if you look at the photo, concentration of property that has built up in that particular area of Westbrook. In fact, it's built up so much that sometimes you can't get fire engines down there because cars park in the road. So adding another property at exactly the pinch point that we already have a problem with congestion. I'm not arguing that a few people going to school, I understand that, but as you saw in all the photos there were vehicles parked all the way in front of the site itself. And where those vehicles are going to subsequently park, I don't know. So to say that there's not a highway problem, we think is unrealistic and fails to recognise what the photos themselves demonstrate to you. We as a parish council are struggling also in explaining to people why, at the expense of the public purse, the district council went through a process of agreeing a settlement boundary. And they did that 2 years ago. And there was considerable input from everybody in the community. And the parish council took a lot of effort and time in responding to that. If at the end of the day, the process of creating a settlement boundary is going to be breached within 2 years of it setting it specifically to exclude a site, there are many in the village who consider that that does not demonstrate any form of democratic control, but rather that some form of bias has entered the system. That is not a good thing. That leads to a general diminution of this council in the face of its residents. Officers have also recorded that the agricultural land classification is 4. There is no agricultural land classification for that site. In fact, I've checked with Natural England. There's a general map published in 1989, which specifically says you may not use it for site-specific justifications. So it's important to realize it's agricultural land. As far as we know, it could be grade 1 or 2. It hasn't actually been qualified. And the statement to the contrary in the document is an error in fact. I understand at the minute that the general principle is that because we've got a shortage of housing, we're just going to allow everything through. All policies can be thrown to the wind. I'm sorry, but that doesn't seem to be consistent with what both the council said in its document issued Housing Supply at February 2025, which, by the way, at section 1.5 says that where a development may impact a national asset, i.e. land in an AO in a national landscape, it may, of course, recuse itself from making a forced decision of development in principle. That's in your own document at section 1.5. It also follows from the various applications that were made to appeal, that appeals have frequently found, and in fact in both the cases concerned, found that the addition of one extra house does not qualify or should not be considered as sufficient to then throw every single policy away when it comes to making important decisions about areas which are meant to be protected. In fact, it actually specifically states that in the document which is referenced in the officer's document. Finally, and I think possibly almost more importantly, the suggestion here, based on those planning appeals, is that you would—
Coming up to 4 minutes.
Great, thank you. That you would secure this with a Section 106 agreement. Section 106 agreement, I'm afraid to say legally, is a planning condition. The law quite explicitly says you may not apply a planning condition to a decision in permission in principle. It's absolutely unlawful to do so. What you may do is you may ask for a unilateral undertaking by the person concerned, but you certainly cannot apply Section 106. You can stitch the unilateral undertaking into the 106 subsequently at the next decision process, but you can't do it now. So it doesn't conform to any of your policies. It's not even very well, the data behind it isn't even correct, and it's largely and popularly contrary to what the village wants and from what was agreed with this council less than 2 years ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, members, questions. Can you just stand there, please, in case there's a question from one of the members? Yes, Councillor Abs.
Actually, I just want to say thank you very much. That's one of the most lucid and well-presented arguments I've heard in a long while. I haven't actually got a question for you because it was that good.
You're too kind.
Thank you very much.
Questions? No, not comments. No, I think you've obviously made a considerable presentation, which is gasped the members, and
thank you.
We will continue on the process anyway. Right, I've now got the objector, Michael Webb. Is Michael Webb present? Yes, you are. Right, okay. Again, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors and everyone else. I appreciate the opportunity to address you today. As you're aware, I represent a very significant number of residents from Westbrook and Boxford who have expressed their strong objections to this development proposal. Now, I only received the report and its recommendations late last night. There are, in my view, a number of contradictions in this report, which I will try and highlight as I go through the issues. The family who owns the land in question has substantial holdings in and around Boxford and Westbrook, yet the applicants do not reside in the immediate area. Over the years, it has become evident that their primary objective is to develop as much land as possible. While the parish council has made efforts to engage the applicants in discussions about sympathetic development, to date, the applicants have not been prepared to engage with the parish council. Having lived in Westbrook for over 40 years, I've witnessed the persistent struggle to preserve our heritage as a historic hamlet in an area of outstanding natural beauty. Boxford and Westbrook are amongst the most attractive historic settlements in West Berkshire. The defining characteristic of Westbrook is our narrow lane that leads back to the River Lambourne. The lane not only culminates in a dead end, at the M4 crossing, but also serves as an emergency access point to the westbound M4 carriageway. The report continually refers to Westbrook either as a village, which clearly it is not, or part of Boxford, which it is not. It is a hamlet in its own right, attached to Boxford, and as such carries a rural distinction that forms a crucial part of England's rural heritage that needs to be preserved. When I first moved to Westbrook in the early 1980s, The lane was lined with a single row of houses beyond which lay open countryside. Today, we find ourselves at the mercy of developments that threaten to alter the fabric of our community and Westbrook's status as a rural hamlet. For instance, planning permission granted some 25 years ago for 4 thatched houses on the site of Knapp's Farm, which is just opposite, owned at the time by the family of the applicant. Only one house was constructed at that time, with later developments, one as recently as last year, bearing no resemblance to the original application. The justification at the time to demolish Knapp's Farm was that the narrowness of the road made it unsuitable for farm equipment. Ironically, the farm was simply relocated further up Westbrook, next to the river on the site of a burnt down barn, resulting in increased farm traffic on the very road that was deemed to be inadequate. The current development proposal is for a field which lies outside of the designated settlement area. The field clearly defines the boundary between the main area of housing in Westbrook and the more sporadic nature of housing down to the river. It should not be described as representing an infill or a rounding off opportunity. To describe it as such could set a precedent for further encroachments surrounding land, undermining the purpose of our designated settlement boundary and further damaging the rural character of our important riverside area. Planning permission has now been given for a new dwelling on the site of the new farm next to the river, and therefore greater care must be given to protect the settlement boundary and the field in question so that no precedent is set to develop any further land from the field to the new dwelling on the farm. The settlement boundary is there for a good purpose. There must be a very, very compelling reason to ride roughshod over it, and there is simply no compelling reason in this instance. The field in question is classified as agricultural land, which was historically used by the village for allotments.
You're now up to 4 minutes.
And has been used in recent years to graze sheep and chickens. It supports a vibrant ecosystem, including a population of mice and voles, and is frequently frequented by barn owls, a testament to its ecological value. In summary, our objections to this application are defined by several key points. The field in question lies outside the established settlement area. The application is for provisional planning approval. This means that details regarding the number of houses and their size and positions are not final. Continued backland or frontland development is destroying Westbrook as a hamlet, and the layout of Westbrook was never designed to cater for this type of clustered development. In the opinion of the residents, there should be more development of houses either in front, no more development of houses either in front or behind existing houses. This development lies directly in front of an existing dwelling. In the report,
You're just coming up to 5 minutes. If you can conclude, please. Okay.
Okay. I think that this development is clear. The building houses 2 or more, in some places 3 deep, along a small lane, destroys the ribbon characteristics described by the conservation officer. I can see no reason of any reason to have to build this house. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Amatharaj first.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. You mentioned that the land was used as an allotment by the residents. So do you know when that has changed hands or when that has stopped becoming an allotment, if I may right?
It was a long time ago. I think it was in the late 60s. But since then, it's been used for agricultural purposes, for sheep grazing and chickens and things.
Further questions? No? Okay. You can return back to public gallery. I'm now going to call upon the agent, Gareth Johns. Again, 5 minutes. The 5 minutes starts when you are about to commence with your speech.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Gareth Johns and I'm the planning consultant from Provision on behalf of the applicant. Your officer's report provides a balanced assessment of the application and addresses the concerns raised by residents and the parish council. Tonight, I wish to pick up a few key points and explain why permission in principle should be granted. The site is acknowledged by your officers as a suitable location for a new home at Boxford. Your policy officer's professional assessment was also that the proposed site met the criteria for inclusion in the settlement boundary as an infill or rounding off opportunity. Therefore, this is exactly the type of site that should be coming forward for some small-scale housing. The site is surrounded by existing homes and is effectively an infill development. Further, there is no harm from the proposal. The Conservation Officer acknowledges that any proposal would be seen as a continuation of the existing built-up area of the village and would not harm the significance of the conservation area. Officers also accept that the proposal will not have a significant adverse impact on the North Wessex Downs national landscape. The site is well screened by existing vegetation and surrounded by existing homes. Moreover, there is ample space within the site to deliver additional soft landscaping and tree planting at the technical detailed consent stage. The density of the development also responds to the site's character and relationship with the adjacent built form. Your highways team has no objection in principle to the proposal, including in relation to traffic generation, parking, highway safety and access. There are also no objections in relation to drainage, ecology, trees and neighbouring amenity. In relation to nutrient neutrality, the applicant is fortunate to have wider agricultural land holdings in the area. As such, a mitigation scheme can be delivered by the applicant to offset any impact on the phosphates on the River Lambourne. A Section 106 agreement can be signed to secure that mitigation with a detailed specification provided at the TDC stage. As you are all aware, there is a housing crisis. There is a need to deliver more homes. The Council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, around 2.6 years. Accordingly, the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies. The emerging local plan does not deal with this increased local housing need and will need to be reviewed immediately. Also, the Council will need to include a 20% buffer to its 5-year housing land supply calculation from July 2026. Consequently, over the next few years, there is a need to continue to grant permissions for new homes. Your own planner's judgment is that this is in principle an acceptable site for a new home, akin to an infill development, identified as suitable for inclusion in the settlement boundary, and with no adverse harms. There are several further benefits, including contributing to the short-term housing supply, as the site can be built out quickly, to the village vitality and community facilities and services, SIL receipts, construction jobs for local builders, and biodiversity net gain. We therefore hope that members will see the overall benefits of the scheme where the principle of residential development on the site is considered to be acceptable. There are no technical in principle objections, and detailed matters will be further addressed at the TDC stage. We therefore ask that you accept your officer's recommendation and resolve to grant permission in principle. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions at all from Mr. Jones? No. Okay. Oh yeah, right. Okay. Councillor Amarfaraj.
Chairman, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jones. Would you explain, you mentioned about the application being principal. We know that one. I wanted to understand from you as an agent of the applicant, what is the rationale? Why do you think like a principal application should be sought rather than presenting us a full application? If you are satisfied with you're complying with all the regulations.
Yes. So it allows landholders to come forward with planning applications because it doesn't require the detailed technical considerations, which can be quite costly to produce the reports and the architectural drawings and things like that. So it allows the applicant to bring it forward, the landholder to bring it forward themselves. Particularly. Yeah.
Further questions? No? Okay. You can return to your public gallery seat. No, which of the ward members is speaking? No, is Councillor Bennyworth speaking?
Well, not as far as I'm aware.
Right, okay.
And we haven't actually registered to speak as ward members, so I'm not sure we can. We both get our say as members of the committee, and I didn't feel I had anything new to add for the benefit of other members of committee.
All right, okay. Fair enough. If that's the case,
I
then
think, I think it's quite tricky given we're actually both on the committee.
yeah, and I would accept that. I know in the past it was a similar situation. Councillor Bennyworth's registered, but obviously possibly he's out the country at this moment in time. Okay, members, questions to Lauren? Right, Councillor Wollaston. Okay, well, I don't mind. We're not going to fight who's the first. Go on, carry on.
We obviously haven't got a traffic officer here, but I am very concerned about the narrowness of that lane. I don't know how we deal with that.
Are you able to address that at all?
So traffic considerations are not part of the scope of a permission in principle application. So we would look at those sort of details, including parking and trip generation, through a technical detail stage application, should this application be approved.
Okay, I think you might like to make a few observations in the debate, Councillor Wollaston. Anyway, okay, right, Councillor Amstrad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm struggling to understand this planning in principle. Normally, the planning in principle ones could have been like for a large development to understand if this is agreed, but this for a single dwelling. But just wanted to understand the not the technicalities, but the possibilities. Like if we were to reject this application, would that stop the applicant from presenting a full application later? That means that if we reject this, there cannot be no development, and vice versa. If we approve this application and later stage when they put a full application, would we get a chance to refuse that one, considering the impact on the traffic and other aspects on the design and all the stuff? Because I can't figure out what would be the possibilities of it. So if you could just explain that too. Thank you.
You can respond.
Thank you, Chair. The permission in principle route is, as was explained by Lauren during the presentation, it's stage one of a two-stage planning permission, and planning permission doesn't take effect until you get the technical details consent, which you have to get within 3 years of getting the permission in principle approval. It doesn't, if members were minded to refuse this permission in principle, then it doesn't prevent the applicants from submitting another application. They could submit an outline application on the site or a full application. It doesn't prevent them from submitting another application. Hopefully that answers your question.
On the other, vice versa, if we approve this one, would we not get a chance or have to go with the next stage? Would we have to again consider the aspects of that particular application, not refuse again that the principle of development in this application?
Yeah, if members were minded to approve the permission in principle application, then the applicant would then have 3 years from the date of the decision to submit and have the technical details consent assessed and approved. That could be called to committee. That is in its essence a full planning. It's similar to a full application, the technical detail stage, because that's where you can attach all the conditions and you have all the reports and you can consider access, highway, safety, issues like that. So that if members were minded to approve that in the application should come in, then that could again be called to committee and members could discuss the technical details consent application.
Thank you, Chairman.
Hey, right, Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I don't really, the question's kind of there, but eluding me at the moment. Can this type of request be taken to appeal in the same way that a normal planning application can?
Yes, it can. Yes.
Right. So that's interesting. And if we were minded to approve, then is it effectively as though we're allocating the land suitable for building, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, and
You're accepting the principle of development of
so
one
then-
dwelling on that site.
Of one, but then does that also mean that okay, well, one was suitable, so I'll bring in one for 5? And would the weight then start to go, well, it's already allocated land. I'll just keep pushing the boundary.
No, the assessment that the officers made on the application, which is for one dwelling, and that cannot change when the technical details consent stage.
It has to be for one dwelling.
One dwelling. Yeah, because that's
Otherwise,
been
we're back to
approved.
ground zero.
Yeah, otherwise they would need to put in a new planning permission principle or a new application.
Thanks.
And then we would assess it differently. You know, we would assess its impacts accordingly.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay, right, Councillor Vickers.
I mean, the answer's been given to what was my question. This is, in effect, another way of allocating land. In other words, massively increasing its value because it is now building land and not agricultural land if we approve this. Right. In effect, you're basically making a nonsense of the settlement boundary, the settlement boundary review and the whole local plan process, which is supposed to do the allocation of land for housing. This is a way around it, which I wasn't aware of until it started coming forward.
It's similar to an outline consent with all matters reserved, but the validation requirements are a lot less. You only have to submit very limited information in terms of a location plan, etc. So yes, it would. If permission in principle was granted, then it would have the effect of, well, it doesn't change the use of that land until the application is implemented. Until that point, it remains agricultural.
Councillor Vickers? Okay, sorry. Okay, right, Councillor Foot and then Councillor Willis.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, my question is for Lauren. Both Councillor Newington and Mr Webb and Councillor Vickers have obviously just talked about the settlement boundary. And we understand that the settlement boundary review was relatively recent. I wonder if you could just clarify for the committee what significant issues were raised, if that's possible, just to inform us, because clearly the settlement boundary is key with this in development. Sorry, I've lost what's it called? It's in principle application. Thank you very much.
So it was put forward by the landowner that the site would be included within the settlement boundary, and the parish council were consulted on that basis as it being a form of rounding off the settlement, the existing settlement. And in the end, it was decided that based on the objection from the parish council, it was decided that the site would not be included in the settlement boundary in this new local plan. Yes, I haven't had a chance to read the objection from the parish council in much detail, but as far as I understand, they wanted to keep the rural character of the area as it stands by not permitting further development within this location.
Councillor Williston.
Thank you, Chair. There was mention earlier that this is getting into a window before this June coming up. So if we were to give consent to this now, does that mean that when it comes up for an outline consent or full detail consent, that actually council policy would then actually give it a refusal, probably, or recommend a refusal?
No, because you'd already have granted, if you were minded to approve this application, you would have granted that consent principle of the land use. So the technical detail stage would just be all the other matters. So no, you couldn't refuse the technical detail stage just because we had the new local.
So this is actually a fairly critical decision in that case. Yeah.
Okay, right, councillor Gaines.
So the parish councillor mentioned grading of the land in one question. So could I understand a bit more about what that entails? And the other thing is one of the representations, one of the objections was the field was previously used for village allotments. I think the objector mentioned that, but it also says about the site being subject to restrictive covenants. Do we know what those covenants are, and are they still in force, please? Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of your first question, the land is graded as agricultural land, but it is not particularly best and most vulnerable land in accordance with the categorization in the NPPF. In terms of the second question, sorry, what was the second question?
So on one of the objections, it mentions the allotments, but it also mentions a site subject to restrictive covenants.
Yes, yeah.
Do we know what those are, and are they still in force?
So I haven't had any view of those covenants, but I can say that that would be a civil matter. It's not a planning consideration at this point.
Thank you.
Further questions, members? Therefore, we're in debate. So I think you had a few points to make, Councillor Willison. I don't know whether you want to open the debate.
Very happy to, Chair. My major concern is when I drove up to the site on the site inspection, I had to pull aside 4 times, I think, because of traffic coming the opposite way and stop. So there clearly is a traffic issue on this road. And I'm just wondering if the highway's actually taken a good look at it with the benefit of seeing what the scheme would be, what their view would have been.
I thought we were in debate. So.
Well, we're in debate, but you technically should have asked that question actually before. But I drew you into it because I thought you wanted to actually talk about highways issues actually within the debate.
I just think it's very unfortunate we haven't got a highways person here.
Right. Okay. Sorry, I might have missed a couple of speakers. Right. Councillor Abbs and Councillor Vickers.
I thought it was about third or fourth in the list actually, but thanks for the promotion, I guess.
Hey, it's fine. Busy concentrating on Councillor Woolston when I should have concentrated on members on left side.
I'm thinking about what I said at the last planning application, a different planning application, but a lot of the principles in my head are the same, except for here, we did a boundary review, and the officers decided they may have taken input from the parish council, but the officers decided that it was not suitable. So time and again, when they've been, because, you know, we've been desperate to allocate land because of, even in the local plan, we needed plenty of it. So now we just need even more. This isn't going to fix the local plan, which is not that far away anyway. I just can't see why we would do a unilateral undertaking, an in principle approval in this case when there's so many things have said no. If it was a full application we were looking at, then we might, you know, take into account the weighted decision. Would have all the information and would know whether we need to kind of go against it or not. Here, we're simply being asked to go, okay, in principle, do you think this is a suitable place for a home? And the answer is no. According to our policies, again, according to the boundary, everything we were told, it's no. So, you know, yes, we can go back to the NPP, but sooner or later, we're going to have to test something like this at appeal, because we're kind of guessing as to the interpretation of certain bits of the NPPF now. And, well, the other thing it is, we seem to have made it clear, or someone made it quite clear, that we can't do a section 105, section 106. I did have a quick look online as well, and it appears to be correct. We might be able to do a unilateral undertaking, which might eventually lead to a section 106 and so on. So it just seems to have been brought in this small window of opportunity between, you know, as getting our local plan approved. And, you know, most of the delay in the local plan is because the person looking at it went, okay, I need some clarification here and here. Then we had a change in government and said, and by the way, we've doubled the target. So all stuff outside of our control. But in principle, do I look at this and think this is a suitable place for a home? And I come to the conclusion, no. So unless somebody says something that otherwise, unfortunately, I would go against officer's recommendation again.
Right, Councillor Vickers and then Councillor Gaines.
Yeah, I mean, this is a difficult one. There are aspects of this country's planning policy I really am uncomfortable with. They, you know, in some cases we're told we can't take account of you know, financial aspects, economic aspects, and yet what we're dealing with is highly sensitive economically, financially to the parties concerned. And to me, you know, there were good reasons which the parish council may not have explained fully, but which I know, and they sort of alluded to them as to why the boundary was, they asked for the boundary to be drawn where it is and why this planning authority agreed with them. And that is, they don't want to see a hard edge as you move down the Westbrook towards the really open countryside, the other side of the river. They wanted to see it sort of gradually thin out. But we're forced, if you're going to have a settlement, you have to draw a line somewhere. And it was consciously decided to draw the line to leave this particular plot outside. Now, of course, the applicant who had promoted it didn't like that. And they, lo and behold, they found a way of ignoring what we as a local planning authority, taking the local elected parish council's urging, decided. So I'm very uncomfortable with this. As for the traffic, yes, it is a problem, but had you noticed there was a 20-mile-an-hour limit here? There is plenty of space off-site for all those residents and their visitors to park normally. I often go down there to start a walk, but I go all the way beyond the river, beyond the farm, onto an unadopted section of road before I park my car when I start and finish a walk from here, because there is really nowhere you can responsibly park in this 20-mile-an-hour limit, which is Westbrook. And I do find it really weird. Whereas when you're allocating housing sites, you do a quick cursory look at the sustainability of that land and whether it's likely to be developed in accordance with policy. So here we are, on one hand, being told this is sort of allocating the land for housing, but on the other hand, our senior planning team officer said, well, actually, it's not allocated until the technical second phase of this comes in. So I think we are all, officers and members, somewhat confused by how we deal with a permission in principle, frankly, and I really don't like it. As regards to nutrient neutrality, why? I mean, there's nothing much more technical than the nutrient neutrality. So if we can leave the traffic implications until a planning application comes in, surely we can deal with nutrient neutrality in the same way. And frankly, all I'm looking at here is somebody finding a way around the allocation of land and the drawing of a settlement boundary. And I would like to refuse it. But I think it would be irresponsible, because I think from what I've read that an appeal would be upheld, because the whole policy in this area is a mess. As regards the AONB, well, the same applies here. Having visited the site, although I overslept on the official site visit, I did go along later in the day. You really can't see into this site from anywhere. So in terms of actual visual impact, as opposed to sort of the feeling that you've actually harmed the AONB, there is a virtually nil visual impact from anybody outside the site to the fact that its use will be changed by this in the long run. So I don't think it's a sustainable location. Boxford, yes, it has a very upmarket pub. It has a very occasional bus route, and that's about all. It's got a very decent parish hall, actually, but nowhere near this site. That's where any development should occur, in my opinion, if you want to really conserve the conservation area of Boxford, is somewhere outside the existing settlement boundary and well away from it. And yes, we do need some housing in all of our villages to make them more sustainable. But I'm inclined to vote against this at the moment, unless I've been given a good reason why I really can't.
We will continue around the table before obviously somebody comes up with a proposal. Councillor Gaines and then Councillor Amaraj.
Thank you, Chairman. I feel like we're having to make this decision with our eyes closed and one hand behind our back. We don't know, excuse me, we don't know about the highways issue. And there is a highways issue, as we all found when we were trying to park our cars. I had to drive all the way down the bottom, turn around and come back again. And so that was an issue. I would be very worried about emergency services there. And so I think there's lots of things we don't know. And it's very difficult to make decisions when we don't know these things, because we're saying, oh, yes, we'll approve this. And then along comes a planning application, which might be something we actually don't agree to. You know, we're saying there's one dwelling, and we know from Mrs. Inston that we can only have one dwelling on that when the planning application comes through. But they could put a separate application in for two dwellings. Later on, now they've got if they've got the approval for in principle. So I'm very torn. I'm torn between the fact that actually I know what the NPPF says, and I've just actually said that in the previous application, but I also don't think necessarily the same things apply to this, because I don't know enough information to say with any clarity, yes, I think this should be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, right, Councillor Amaraj.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief as possible. Just to maintain the consistency. I agree with most of the points from Councillor Vickers, particularly on the visual impact. We did go to the site visit, and there are number of houses there. So it's not to say that this one piece of plot, we're having a house in there would impact the visual impact there, and it's the next adjacent plot has a farmhouse or something next to the ground. So this nested plot is somehow excluded from the settlement boundary. I don't know the reason why it was excluded in the first place. I'm not privy to that one. But coming to this application itself, in the principal one, I'm a bit uncomfortable on this one, because as Mrs. Inston said, if we agree in principle, then we are agreeing the use of the land, and I'm not entirely comfortable approving or supporting this, knowing that there will be an application possible by the applicant with all the details addressing the nutrient neutrality. They can come up to this council and to us and with all the details, and we can look at this as differently. So I'm not comfortable supporting this as a principle, but I'm not fully against this as an application where we could say that no, nothing can be built. And it ceased to be an allotment, as the objector said, in 1960. So for the good part of 60 years, there's been not a use, except that it's used for a chicken run or maybe an animal grazing. So I support in principle that we should be looking at plots where there is a sustainable development possible for a single detached houses. Character-wise, it should merge with the adjacent properties. But I'm not against we should object to anything outside of settlement boundary, inconsistent. So, but if there is a proposal to refuse this on the basis of some of the aspects, I would support that.
Okay, well, I'm not going to draw you to proposing at this moment in time. I've got two other speakers anyway. Right, Councillor Abson and then the Vice Chairman.
I was going to make a proposal, so I don't know if Clive was going to do it instead, but my proposal will be to go against officers' advice here, mainly because of the reasons they've given actually in the document on page 38, which basically says it breaks CS1, ADTB5, C1, a whole bunch of stuff in there to do with not really meeting the spatial strategies, and we've just gone through it. The thing, this is the thing in the local plan, and even you know, we're saying no, it doesn't meet these things, and it doesn't meet even with the new local plan. It wouldn't have been allocated land, even when the local plan was revised. It still wasn't allocated land. It's not. You see what I mean? So I think we have a plenty of reasons there that we can look, which are policy reasons to say, in our minds, given what we've been told, given what we know, given the site visit, given our experience, that we can rely on these as solid reasons to say, in principle, this is not an application that we would deem suitable at this time. Doesn't stop another application coming through with all the details that we might think differently, but from what we've been told, it does not appear to meet the task that we've been set ourselves, which is in principle this something we should approve, and I don't think it is.
Okay, I'm looking at the Vice Chairman. I don't know whether you want to make speech or you're going to
I'll just finish off there. I mean, I feel everything virtually is against this application that's been pointed out here, and it's being swayed by this awful couple of words that are going on every application now, this tilted balance because of the land supply. Now, this, as we've discussed at length, is permission in principle, which is effectively, I think, you might sort of consider it as a pre-app. This will sort of give the applicant, obviously, the idea of a yes or a no-go gate as to, have I got a chance here? And this is the window of opportunity to do it in. But if, for example, we say yes, the chances are, having said that everything is virtually against this in normal times, the decision, I'm sure, can't preempt, but would be slightly different. So let's just say we go forward, and this responsibility we take of saying we'll go forward. The chances of this applicant getting a full application or an outline planning application in before the local plan is resolved is slim. Now, if we honestly think that we shouldn't give this, then we shouldn't equally subject this applicant to this expenditure of putting a full application together, or just on the reason of this tilted balance. So I didn't know whether or not we got a proposal from Councillor Abbs or not. We didn't, I don't think, but
I think we did.
I'm quite happy to second that on that basis of what I've stated. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, can you? I mean, you're going to firm up the proposal, and then obviously the Vice Chairman, the
officer themselves mentioned that it was breaking policy C1 and ADTP1. So obviously, I support that. If it's breaking the rules, it's breaking the rules. Having said that, though, I read appraisals policy CS1 states that new homes will be allocated in accordance with the spatial strategy. Clear this isn't. We did the spatial strategy. It isn't. So it seems to break that as well. Policies ADTP1 anyway out of the core strategy and policy. I got 6.3 seems to be something we can put our weight behind. C1 was something ADTP1. How many do you want of our rules that we're relying on that saying, well, actually, in our tilted balance, they don't seem to pass muster?
I think it's outside the settlement boundary, of which the presumption is one of refusal to start with.
Do you want some further clarification?
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. I've got down the principle unacceptable contrary to our spatial strategy and our spatial policies. That's absolutely fine. I just wanted to know, there was mention earlier, because obviously we have to be taking into account the tilted balance, whether we like it, or not. And that does say that if we are, I'm just thinking down the road with an appeal, if there are concerns about impact on the north, on the national designated landscape, mention was made of that, and I just want to know whether members were included.
We know that it will be some harm. We're just saying how much harm. And the thing for me in my mind, it's usually not one thing. Sometimes it's just bang, you can't do it for this reason. But here we have a swelling of information that when you add it all together, you go, no, I'm afraid not for me on this one. And the impact, we don't know what design it might possibly be, so we don't know whether it would be exceptional. So how can we make a decision on something that we know might come along, we could easily count, which we are very difficult to refuse on once we've given this outline. So I think we throw everything that was mentioned as a reason why we could, or that was a negative reason, and say in our tilted balance, we're putting more weight on those reasons, and impact on the area of outstanding natural beauty, North Western Down National Landscape is of course one of them.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. That's exactly what I wanted to
Sorry,
know.
I've rambled on there a bit, didn't I? Apologies.
Okay, you do you have something extra? No, you didn't. Okay. And any other points that need to be addressed?
I mean, I did, it may be in the minutes, but certainly what I said was I think actually the impact on the AUMB is even less with this than it was with the previous one. What to me is different is that we have no comfort. We all said we don't have any comfort that a full application or a stage 2 in the PIP route towards a full application, a full consent, would not meet with lots of negative comments from some of the other consultees. Whereas with the one in Tudor Avenue, nobody was against it on a full application. So I just don't have comfort in giving outline, effectively allocating this land for one house, full stop, however the route is. And it appears to me that this particular site was looked at very closely in the local plan process and was taken out of the settlement boundary for a good reason. So why are we overturning that through this PIP route? I really am uncomfortable about that. And it's not so much about the impact on the AOMB and B, because that is insignificant.
Yeah. I don't know if we can add them as well, if I may. Obviously, the grading of the land is not indeterminate. It says it's grade 4 here. However, we know it was allotments, which wouldn't be grade 4. That would be up there in grade 1, admittedly 45, 50 years ago. But as only chickens and various things, there's missing information. And the issue is, I think we're only, was it 90 metres, 95 metres from the River Lambourne with this particular development? It's really not very far at all. So nutrient neutrality, springs to mind. There are concerns at this point because I have no detail. But whether or not I can turn that into a reason to object, I've got concern about all these potential impacts should an application come forward.
Deborah, and then I'll bring in Councillor Foot.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to nutrient neutrality, it would be difficult to sustain a reason for refusal based on that because we have no objections from our ecologist, and there are appeals where 106's unilateral undertakings have been one recently last year. Because the PPG for permission in principles does state that if the development is habitats development, which is development that would cause significant harm to a protected habitat such as the SAC, then mitigation measures need to be put in place, and inspectors have accepted the only way to secure that at PIP stage is via a legal agreement. So
unilateral undertaking, which
unilateral or a 106, either.
It can't be 106.
But it can be a unilateral, and the applicants are accepting that, and it would just be a matter of the applicant.
I'm just trying to give as many reasons as possible for the officers to be able to fight this at appeal if necessary. So,
Councillor Foot, did you have some other reasons?
I see. Yes, thanks, Chair. Just very quickly, I wonder if we could ask the officers to go back and look at the settlement boundary statement so that we're absolutely clear about the reasons why the settlement boundary was drawn where it was or where it is, and that we make sure that forms part of our reasoning, because clearly there were careful considerations by the parish council as to drawing where that settlement boundary is. This site is outside it, as has been mentioned before, for a good reason. So I think it would really be useful to go back and look carefully at that piece of work so that we can put the wording in this if we refuse it as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Foot. Yes, that is possible. I know some of the reasons why it was excluded to do with the loss of that soft transition between the more tighter, denser development to the south and the much looser knit development to the north. So it was that loss of that rural, that very soft transition. So that can certainly be included as a separate reason because of the impact on the national landscape as a result of that. But yes, we certainly can. But it will all revolve around the impact on the national landscape.
Yeah, can we word that in a way to include the whole of the resets of? You said you remember a couple of them. There might be more that we're not privy to, but that we are now got a concern that a whole set of reasoning was involved. So how do we word that to include the previous sets of reasons in a nice, clean way?
If members are minded to refuse and to delegate the actual wording of the refusal to officers, officers will look at the reasons why that was rejected. The settlement boundary revisions were rejected and incorporate that into a reason for refusal.
So this committee is minded to include the reasons for the original boundary position in our refusal reasons, and you will fill in the blanks.
Yes, if members are happy to delegate to officers to fill in those blanks and to articulate why the reasons why they're harm to the NDL.
Yeah.
Okay, members. We've had a proposal and seconder to refuse this application. Can I have a show of hands, then, please? All those in favour? Okay. Sorry, that's four? Sorry, the same. Sorry, your hand went up and down, Vice Chairman. So yeah, okay. And I'm going to obviously just abstain on this case. But so I think it's 8-1. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Are you going to? You want a 2-minute break? Do you? Right, members, we're going to reconvene and we're now on item 4, brackets 3, application number 25/00128/House, Hampstead Norris. And I'm obviously going to invite Lauren Hill to begin her presentation. But in view of the situation with obviously no speakers, Lauren, I think it would be helpful just to make a very brief presentation on this application. Okay.
Well, I had a speech prepared, but I'll just put that aside then. This application is 25/00128/House. This application is with the committee due to a planning enforcement officer being the applicant. The recommendation is to delegate the development manager to approve the planning permission. The house is within Hampstead Norris. It comprises a 2-story dwelling house and a rear garden. The dwelling is located within the center of a terrace with no established uniform pattern of development. This is a view of the highway looking towards the east with the site to the left. Again, it's in the other direction with the side to the right. This is from the rear garden looking towards the west. And again, this is looking towards the east. This is the rear of the dwelling. And you can see the 3 Velux windows on the first floor that will be changed to dormer windows. And this is the current situation in terms of overlooking from those Velux windows. This is the proposed block plan. Just to point out that there's a rear extension that's proposed and 2 dormer windows that you can see there, as well as replacement paving to the front steps and new handrails on either side. This is the existing and proposed ground floor plan. Again, you can see the extension, which is very modest. It's only proposed to extend it by 1.5 meters. Which equates to 8 square meters. On the first floor plan, very small differences on these plans, but you can see that there's a new dormer window with the largest being to the right, with a smaller dormer window for the bathroom to the left. And again, on the roof plan, you can see the dormer windows as well as the flat roof extension. This is the proposed and existing elevations, the existing being to at the top and the proposed being to the bottom. With regards to the dormer windows, there's horizontal cladding that's being introduced, but otherwise all materials will match the existing. Let me just see here. I think yeah, the proposal complies with the house extensions SPG because it is clearly subservient. And it complies with the quality design SPG, as well as the various spatial planning policies. And the recommendation, therefore, is to approve the application, subject to conditions.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions to Lauren at all? So we immediately move straight into debate. Councillor Wollaston.
It seems to be totally uncontroversial, Chairman. So why don't we just get to the point and vote on it?
You formally propose?
I'm formally proposing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gaines. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's quite clear.